Perfect. All right, so here we are. Once again, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our workshop. Today's topic will focus on different forms of online abuse and technical steps you can take to mitigate and hopefully survive this abuse. This workshop has been reworked. It has completely new content since our last series. So hopefully, all of the resources are active, are current, and will be very helpful in case you ever need them. So I'm Emily, your host for this workshop. I'm also the Security Ambassador for Future ADA. So if you're not familiar with us, we're a 501c3 out of Spokane, Washington, that advocates for inclusivity and diversity in STEAM. We also work with the community on issues surrounding privacy and security. And as part of our efforts, we host these virtual workshops maybe around once a month, and we also do something really cool. So every Saturday, we host open office hours, which are an opportunity to virtually meet with a security professional who can help you answer questions related to privacy and security. So for example, we can help you set up a password manager and kind of show you how to use it. We can even help you make a plan to lock down your online presence or even help you answer general tech questions. That's what we're here for. The reason this workshop is more technically focused is because my background is in information security. So my work can be described as ethical hacking, which requires me to think like a malicious actor and attempt to exploit security flaws. But then I come back to my employer, to my clients, and then I inform them of what I was able to do and some steps they can take to better secure themselves. The difference between basically an ethical hacker and more of a malicious hacker is really that I got permission to hack your system, company, organization, whichever target it is. Lastly, I'm a survivor. So what drove me to create this workshop was the realization that there was a lack of knowledge on how online abuse is performed from a technical perspective and matching those technical attacks to a defense. So I really hope that today's webinar will help you gain a unique perspective on the issue. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Once again, this webinar is currently being recorded. I welcome questions during the presentation. I will do my best to answer questions right away. For questions that can be a bit more complex or maybe require a longer response, I'll be happy to address those questions at the end of the presentation. Finally, a link to the slides will be sent maybe an hour or two after we conclude the webinar today so that you can have access to the links and resources that are mentioned in the slides. Okay, so let's get to it. Online abuse can take many forms. So first, I'd like us to take a look at some common forms of online abuse, as well as some brief examples. So the first definition here is harassment, which includes threats, unwanted contact, rude or obscene messages. One example of this is a councilwoman recently who spoke out against online harassment because when she showed her support to the Black Lives Matter movement, she received threats. She was targeted with racial slurs, both on Instagram and Facebook. This is, classic harassment. We could also call it online harassment. The little caveat here I have is that when you're researching online harassment, you might notice that it's also a catch-all term for online abuse. So context is important when defining online harassment. So here at Future ADA, we call online abuse all forms of online attacks. And we specify then online harassment as being harassment that is online. Now, what if this harassment is repeated or happens over a certain period of time? This is when we start defining this behavior as stalking. Cyberstalking is repeated online harassment with intent to threaten, intimidate, injure, or kill. Cyberstalking is defined as online harassment only, but stalking often happens online as well. Again, I'm not going to go over the legal definition, but keep in mind that a lot of stalking they can take place both offline and online. But if we're talking about generally online-only stalking, then we might mention it as cyberstalking. A case from 2018, as an example of this, involved Mr. Joel Krasinski. He performed cyberstalking campaigns against two victims, and for one, he spammed the victim with phone calls, impersonated them on an online dating website, sent anonymous death threats, impersonated a journalist as well, and for the other victim, he also sent death threats, but signed that victim up for weight loss and suicide prevention programs, also referencing this victim's work address. So these are some of the tactics that Mr. Krasinski used for his online campaigns against his victims. So we're going to go over a little bit later on some of the defenses for certain things of the sort, or things we can do to help mitigate some of these issues. Our next definition for online abuse is related to doxing. So doxing is posting a victim's personal details, such as their home address, their work address, their phone number, sometimes it's their family members' phone numbers. The whole purpose is to really post people's personal information in the hopes that others will harass them. An example of this can be found in the book Crash Overrides by game developer and author Zoe Quinn. So to quote her in her book, she says, "My phone continued to ring with calls from unknown numbers. My boyfriend at the time, Alex, answered it once, lowering his voice, hoping that the person would think they'd gotten the wrong number and would back off. In the quiet of the tiny room, I could hear grown men on the other end asking if I could come suck their dicks if they promised to give my game a good review. People openly discussed on Twitter what had happened when they called my number, and to my horror, what had happened when they'd called my dad." So that's obviously terrifying, but is a very good example of the kinds of attacks related to doxing. Another form of online abuse is swatting. This happens when someone calls a local police department or local law enforcement of their target under false pretenses in the hopes that the SWAT team will come and engage their target's house. Teletyping and telecommunications devices are often used in these attacks to help mask the caller's voice. And an example of that is that in 2017, Tyler Barris, shown here, placed a call from California to police in Wichita, Kansas, claiming that he was a local resident who had just shot his father and was holding other family members hostage. And when Wichita officers responded to the address that he gave, they came in with a SWAT team and they shot and killed Andrew Finch, who was a father of two who had done literally nothing wrong. Mr. Barris ended up being sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, but this is definitely a casualty from a form of online abuse. Other common forms of online abuse, revenge porn, which is sharing a victim's intimate media, so this can be videos, pictures, text messages, more without their consent. Sextortion, right? Threatening to share a victim's intimate information unless they do X, Y, or Z. There's also attempts to compromise or lock out someone from their online account. So you can do certain types of attacks where perhaps you perform a denial of service on an online account, and that prevents, you know, the target from having access to that account. Other forms of online abuse, which I recently learned about, are non-consensual acts within online games. An example of that is in the online game Red Dead Redemption. For example, the game has an option where you can tie up other online gamers, and this has made a lot of women gamers the targets of fictitious rape simulation, which is something that, you know, I never knew would have been a thing if I wasn't, you know, an online gamer in a women community. And of course, right, online abuse can be mixed with in-person harassment, stalking, or violence. So as we mentioned earlier with stalking, right, nowadays, a lot of stalkers will mix in, you know, methods of stalking that include technology. So how common is online abuse and who does it affect? Well, according to a survey led by Lee Rainey at the Pew Internet Research Center, in the US, online harassment increased by 6% between 2014 and 2017, and now affects about 41% of adults, although 66% of adults say they have witnessed online harassment. So most online harassment consists of less severe behaviors such as name calling, purposeful embarrassment. And if you start looking at the differences between genders, it can get, you might start to see certain trends, right? So overall, men are a bit more likely to experience forms of harassing behavior online, with 44% of men versus 37% of women. And men are also more likely than women to have been called offensive names or to have received physical threats. By contrast, women, and especially young women, encounter sexualized forms of abuse at much, much higher rates than men. So 21% of women ages 18 to 29 report being sexually harassed online, versus 9% for men of that age group. And then another difference is regarding how harassment affects a person. So for many women, online harassment leaves a strong impression. So 35% of women who have experienced any type of online harassment describe their most recent incident as either extremely or very upsetting, which is about twice the share among men, which is 16%. So that's really interesting in how there are gender differences in how threats are perceived and felt by victims as well. So what about stalking? In 2012, the Bureau of Justice Statistics came out with a comprehensive report about stalking, and it highlighted that in the US, 2.2% of women 18 or older were a victim of stalking, compared to 0.8% of men. Other highlights in the report included that nearly 7 in 10 stalking victims knew their offender in some capacity. And the percentage of stalking victims was highest for individuals who were divorced or separated, compared to those that were married, never married, or widowed. Over the years, many researchers have attempted to classify stalker behaviors, motivations, methods, in order to better understand them, right? So understanding the typology of a stalker can help you better assess the risk you may be facing should you ever be the target of a stalker. In 2008, Glancy and Saney, two researchers, took different characteristics of classification criteria for stalkers and made them into this table right here. And some of these characteristics are pretty self-evident, right? You know, the mental status, method, relationship, but the motivation might be a little bit less evident. So I'd like to go over, you know, the different characteristics for motivation. This comes actually from research by Mullen, Patty, Purcell, and Stewart in 1999. So it starts with the rejected stalker. The rejected stalker is motivated by a mixture of revenge and desire for reconciliation after a relationship ends. The intimacy-seeking stalker often has erotomanic delusions. Erotomanic meaning with a delusional belief that a powerful person is in love with them, or you can also say it's unrequited love. The incompetent stalker may be intellectual or socially limited. There's a resentful stalker who seeks to frighten and distress the victim. And very concerning is the predatory stalker who is preparing for a sexual attack. So gaining a better understanding of the type of stalker we're dealing with can help us better address the risk and defense measures we're going to take, right? For example, depending on your relationship, right? If this is an ex-intimate partner, you know, do they know enough details about us to compromise our online accounts, to know where we work, right? How much information based on everything, all of the different characteristics in this table? Can I make a better risk assessment of my situation with a stalker and kind of get an idea of where I should start defending myself? So we're going to be looking, of course, at these technical defenses later, but it's a good idea to kind of try to understand who you're dealing with, again, to better assess your threat and devise a strategy. Some factors associated with increased risk of violence among stalkers include a history of making threats, a younger age, a lower level of education, a previous intimate relationship with the victim, a history of ignoring legal orders to stay away from the victim, a history of violence, and substance abuse. All right. So let's get into stalking methods. We're going to go over, for each of these, the method, kind of the overall technology. So here's the telephone. Then we're going to go over different methods as classified by different researchers, their purpose, and then we're going to go over a technical defense. So for telephone, the first method used by stalkers is caller ID. And its purpose is that it might reveal the phone number name, location of the caller, for example, because of the area code. Now, what's a defense for this, right? You can ensure that you're not giving away information via caller ID by ensuring that you opt in via your carrier to block that feature. You can also, from your phone, block that feature as well. It all depends on who your carrier is and what kind of a phone you are using. For example, I have an iPhone, and I can go in my settings, and I can make sure that my phone number and my caller ID details are not revealed when I make phone calls. Then my number will only appear as an unknown caller. For fax, old school, but can still happen today. Right, fax and reveal your name, fax number, and location of the sender. Again, kind of similar, right? Your location based on area code. You can use virtual fax services for that. Or you can also use *67, apparently, when you're sending out faxes so that you don't reveal your fax number, your name, things of the sort. So that was interesting to learn as millennials, I guess. Another method is teletyping, right? As I mentioned earlier, this technology is often used for swatting attacks, right? Because it's used to either impersonate others, but also perhaps to kind of hide your voice. And so there's not that much, unfortunately, that can be done for that outside of awareness training. And of course, keeping law enforcement aware of swatting threats. If you ever are on the receiving end of a swatting threat, a good idea is, of course, to gather that evidence, screenshot of that, anything you can to then later maybe make a phone call to law enforcement or just keep them aware that there has been a swatting threat against you. And hopefully that would prevent a situation such as the one we saw earlier. Okay, via telephone, some other methods used by stalkers include calling cards, spoofing cards, or spoofing services, right? Because it provides anonymity for stalkers, because it disguises their phone number. There's also spoofing services which will allow you to spoof someone else's phone number so that they'll maybe pick up the phone and you can perhaps impersonate really any number at all. This includes anything from your local law enforcement to maybe you're impersonating a bank, maybe you're impersonating someone's loved one. There are services like that. I have used that myself at work. And so there's a mix of different defenses for that. Of course, you can block certain numbers. You can also do the opposite, which is kind of whitelisting numbers. So whitelisting is the concept of blocking every number except numbers in a trusted contact list. You can also contact your carrier if you're having repeated phone calls or repeated spoofed phone calls. I know that many carriers will have kind of anti-spoofing kind of defenses at the carrier level, and it might be worth having a call with your carrier's phone support line if you're still having a lot of issues with these types of attacks. Of course, if that also fails, unfortunately, you might need to change your number. And that doesn't have to be permanent. You could simply change your number temporarily using a service like My Pseudo or Google Voice until the attacks stop or taper down. Another method, cordless telephone. Again, a little bit of an older technology, but the thing with cordless telephones is they tend to not be encrypted communication. So conversations can be intercepted by other devices. Maybe you remember, I know I remember when I was a kid that I could sometimes listen in on my neighbors making phone calls by tuning into a certain frequency over my FM radio. So that was really interesting. Calls can be made by similar phones on the same line as well. So in this case, we're speaking about an attack where maybe a stalker would buy the same model of cordless phone that you have in order to come in close proximity to your house and hopefully pick up on your phone conversation. A defense for that is switching over to cell phone communications and or using a wired phone if you're using a landline and don't wish to get rid of that landline. You can also use encrypted voice apps, especially if you're having, very important conversations. Perhaps you're having conversations with law enforcement. You're having conversations about an escape strategy. There are encrypted voice applications such as Signal and Wire, which will really make sure that, even if part of these data communications are intercepted, the contents are encrypted and therefore would take a nation level, several year campaign to be able to intercept. So let's take a look at using a pseudo number. Right, in the previous slide, I just talked about changing your number temporarily with My Pseudo or Google Voice. Both of these have free options if you're looking to temporarily get a new phone number, but a really good practice actually is to never reveal your actual phone number, right? Because your phone number can be used to access your account, your bank account, verify your identity, right? Phone numbers nowadays are not what they used to be, right? You use them a lot to verify who you are. If you are in an intimate partner violence situation, right, perhaps your partner will deactivate your phone. And so if possible, I really suggest starting to use an app like, for example, I use My Pseudo, and I can set up different identities and have different phone numbers for each identity, right? So let's say I have Emily at Future Ada. I have a phone number for that. So people can still call me or text me, but that does not reveal my own cell phone number. Then I have a different identity for any kind of phone numbers I might be using for appointments or services, like maybe at the hair salon, things of the sort. And so I can make sure that I'm never giving away my own phone number. And then if it gets flooded, I can simply, cancel that phone number, get a new one. It's very easy for me, right, to not stop. I don't have to stop anything I'm doing with my own phone number or cell phone just because I'm being flooded with phone calls or things of the sort. So I recommend looking into these two services. Another method used by stalkers, of course, is cell phones, right? So smartphones can be hacked. They can be used as listening devices. They can be used as tracking devices, right? Because they have GPS. They can be used to threaten and harass through calls and text messages with or without spoofing, and call history can be monitored. What are some defenses for all of these? So first off, right, ensuring that your smartphone can't be hacked starts with making sure your cell phone is up to date, right? Both your operating system and all the apps you use. You want to encrypt your phone, right? In your settings, both on Android, for iPhones, it's by default. Your data on your phone is encrypted so that it can't, simply, let's say, I know for Androids, they have little SD cards, right? What if someone just grabs a hold of your cell phone or its SD card inside or any kind of data card and then can just start looking through the files on your phone. You want to use a hard-to-guess passcode, passphrase, or biometrics. Biometrics like Face ID or fingerprinting, right? Which is harder. It's better to use a fingerprint or Face ID than 1, 2, 3, 4 as your passcode. So if that makes it easier for you, great, go for it. You want to use a password management app. You want to remove apps that you don't use. A lot of cell phones nowadays kind of come with what I like to call bloatware, which is just a slew of apps that you will never use, and just make it more likely that, right, what if this app becomes vulnerable to a certain attack down the line? So it's just best to get rid of apps you don't use. It makes your risk of compromise less. It lessens that risk of compromise. And finally, you want to double check your location sharing settings. Make sure that you are only sharing your location with trusted individuals, and that you look at that list and you make it as small as possible. You want to make sure, of course, that you have anti-malware or stalkerware. So for Android, these are apps such as Sophos or Bitdefender. For iOS, there is no such thing as anti-malware, really. That's just not how the phone works based on the iPhone architecture. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about that. Don't click on links sent via text message. Don't click on links in emails from unknown sources. And then that goes for both your cell phone and your desktop or laptop. Now, if you see that your phone is acting strangely, your battery is draining, even though you have a new battery, right? If you see that your phone is behaving just in a manner that feels weird, it's always getting hot, it's just, and maybe you've left your phone with an untrusted individual, or you've left your phone unattended, you know, just perform a factory reset, right? Better safe than sorry. And for intimate partner violence, folks, I would suggest getting a second phone, which can't be canceled, controlled, or monitored by your abuser. And if you get help with an IPV counselor, they can help you get that set up. Okay, next up, GPS and location services. Very important to go over this, right? Location can be detected through GPS in your cell phone via things like Find My Phone, your Google account, spyware, stalkerware apps, family, right? So these family or these child safety apps as well can be used to then track any other target. There's also tracking devices such as small portable GPSs that can be then hidden in a car, in a bag, in a purse. There's also social media posts tagging location. So what are some defenses for that, right? Well, first, you want to ensure location sharing services are either off or that you're really only sharing it with an untrusted source. And depending on if you have an active threat, I would just not share my location or use location sharing services at all. You can ensure no stalkerware or malware apps have been installed. A lot of anti-malware apps help you do that. You can ensure online accounts such as Google services aren't compromised, right? Google accounts has ways for you to take a look at active sessions or when your last login was, and includes IP addresses, so you can see if you've had any unauthorized activity on your Google account. You should also ensure that social media doesn't leak your location, and not just by, for example, you know, having Twitter not sharing your location when you're posting something on social media, but also making sure that you are not indicating your location or taking pictures that might indicate your location at any time, right? And that comes to our last one. Don't post location clues on social media, right? I just checked into this great restaurant. I'm hanging out with my friend, and including a picture that might be indicative of where you are. Obviously, we'll leave clues as to where you are, maybe where you work or your favorite hangout spot. So it's better to be safe and just be aware of what you're posting on social media. A question I get asked a lot when it comes to tracking devices is, how do I detect a GPS tracking device on my car? And here are some tips I've learned. So first off, you want to use gloves. Cars are dirty. And a flat light source which can fit under the car. And then you can take a mirror and kind of start looking and feeling for something that's like a small box. The model that I have tested is the SpyTech GPS shown here on the right. And really, it's a small box that should fit, it's about palm-sized box, and it has some magnets on it. And it's typically put in under the car so that the GPS signals can reflect from the road up onto a satellite. So this is where really the first place you should start looking, and then kind of make your way around the car. Look in the car front grille, like for some trucks, there's some very spacious grills in which GPS devices can be hidden as well. And inside, sometimes it's under one of your car seats, the back seats, spare tire compartments are also not as popular locations, but still could be hidden there. And if you're really unsure, I would take that car to a mechanic. Now, of course, if a device is found, don't remove it. Don't touch it too much. Take pictures, get law enforcement involved right away. And a law enforcement officer told me to just make sure if you're not afraid to call 911, let them tell you to call non-emergency if necessary. If you feel threatened, if you find one of these devices, it's obviously your choice and up to you, but you can get law enforcement involved so that they can start getting that documentation for unlawful tracking. All right, this brings us to our next section, computer and internet. Computer and internet related methods. So one method that stalkers use is desktops, laptops, and tablets, which can be hacked. So the purpose behind that is that all data on the computer becomes available to the hacker or stalker and can be used to harm the victim, right? So the first defense is, well, how can I make sure that my data doesn't become available? Well, first, make sure you password protect your devices, all of your devices, with a unique, right, not reused, a unique, strong passphrase. Make sure all of your devices use full disk encryption so that I can't just pop the hard drive and start reading the data right away. Ensure remote lock, wipe, and location on your devices. If you have a Windows device, you can have it set up to an online account, which includes location finding services. And so configure Find My Device on Windows. For Apple products, there is Find My Mac, iPhone, iPad, etc. And for Android, you can configure your device with a Google account. So what's great with that is that in case that device ever connects back to the internet, then you will have remote lock, wiping capabilities, tracking capabilities, which you can then take to law enforcement if necessary. But at least you can prevent that, some malicious person won't have that data with them. I mentioned earlier, right? Password protect your devices. So what's a good password? And I crossed that out because I wanted to start thinking of passwords not as words, but as phrases. So hence the term passphrase, right? It's something that's long. It's something that's unique. It's something that you won't find, in a book somewhere. It's not some kind of known quote or known phrase, right? It's something that's unique to you and you can have fun with it, right? So I think my 1200 cats are made of water is a great one, right? It's long. It's not something that, I hear quoted, in the news or my favorite TV shows all the time. Why are these 377 wild horses orange? Is another great one, right? Have fun with it, make it long, make it unique, and then just make sure you don't reuse it. And that is what makes a really good passphrase. Okay, continuing on to another method, public websites, social networking sites, and blogs. Okay, these can be used to threaten the victim, encourage others to contact the victim, right? Doxing can be used to publicly post the victim's personal information. So what are some defenses for that? Best thing you can do is ensure that your social media and online accounts are set to private. However, if you're a very social media-oriented person, maybe you don't want to do that. So then consider using anonymous or false identities online, right? If you want to be open, if you want to share certain things, and again, be wary of what you're sharing, you can still do that, but maybe you want to do it with, again, you know, my name's Emily. Maybe I want to set up an account that's called Steve the Cat, and I'm using that to, you know, create a fake online persona so that it's not tied to me. I'm registering it with a phone number that is a Google Voice number, right? A phone number that's not tied to my real phone number. And maybe I even want to go further and I want to post misleading information. Maybe I'm saying that I live out in the Alaskan wilderness, something of the sort. And I even add some Alaskan wilderness pictures, right? Consider posting misleading information. It's really just a step further than just using anonymous or false identities. Oftentimes when I see people kind of on Facebook, for example, using part of their name or a play of words on their name, and it still makes it really easy to guess who that person is, especially if their profile picture is them, right? And so have a funny random profile picture, use an anonymous false identity, post misleading information, have fun with it, but then you can still use social media to stay in contact with, you know, certain friends and family if you'd like. Make sure you clean up posts with sensitive data, right? Security questions, license plates, addresses, birthdays. These are things that you can easily find on people's Facebook walls or social media walls and use that to guess private information. And make sure you're also regularly cleaning up friends and followers. It's also a really good idea to always do those spring, winter, summer cleanings and, you know, ask yourself, do I still trust this person? Am I still talking to this person, right? Has this person had their account compromised? Maybe you would want to unfriend them because now you don't know who has access to your information. Other things that can be done with public websites and social networking sites are they can be used to impersonate the victims or others to gain information about or access to the victim. When we looked at the cyber stalking case earlier, Mr. Krasinski had taken some of the pictures of his first victim and signed them up on an online dating website and kind of impersonated them. But you can go further and then try to impersonate, let's say, a loved one, a family member, maybe a grandson, a granddaughter, which is very common with identity theft and fraud, right? You can also use that to spread rumors about the victim. I recently saw a Twitter account that was impersonating a man and kind of tweeting some slurs and derogatory comments as that person. It was very obvious it was a fake account, but still these are ways that can be used to perform online abuse. So some defenses for this, of course, include cleaning up your online presence. People search engines, right? Remove yourself from people's search engines. I have a link that, down a little bit later on down in my slides for that. Unused accounts. Remove your unused accounts. They're just waiting there, sitting there, doing nothing. Maybe they contain your information, like your credit card information, your home address. Maybe they're just waiting to be hacked and have whatever password you were using for that account be leaked and then be reused to gain access to your other accounts. So it's good to close these accounts down. Keep friends and family aware of harassment or online abuse. Right? Give them a heads up that someone's trying to portray you, or someone's trying to, you know, get into your life or is following you online, and you know, try to have them be on your team so that it can maybe even be on the lookout for any signs of something nefarious for you. Of course, report threats directly to websites. after gathering screenshots and evidence. A good example of that is I saw on Twitch once there was someone that was live streaming and threatened with rape another user. So because I saw this, I took the clip, I took a backup of the clip, I took pictures and screenshots of this person's Twitch profile. They were an active duty Marine, and so I was able to send that over to whoever was responsible for that, and I also reported it to Twitch. Within 5 minutes, that profile was taken down, and so had I not gathered that evidence beforehand, I wouldn't have had anything to really present anyone with. So it's really important to gather that evidence before you report. And then, of course, you can report threats to law enforcement depending on what they are as well. Finally, ensure you are using a password manager and change passwords for all of your accounts, or make sure at least you have unique passwords for all of your accounts. And we'll get more into that in a few slides. So cleaning up your social media. What does this look like, right? There's different types of information that can easily be used against you. I mentioned a little bit earlier, right? Your vehicle make, model, license plate. Maybe it will help me understand what you drive so that I can better follow you. Birthdays, anniversaries, because I can maybe use that to reset your password for certain accounts. Family member names, especially if they live in your same household, because sometimes if you lock down all of your social media, if you lock down all of your life, right, maybe the best next way that I will use to find information about you will be your children, your brother, your sister, your parents, anyone that lives, especially if they live in the same household, right? Your security, your information is only as protected as the people around you let you have that information be protected. So very important to keep that in mind. Security question answers, pet names, street you grew up on, mother's maiden name. Several social media posts will help people find that information. And pictures, right? Be aware of what you're posting. Badges, because they might show where you work, your workplace name. The types of locks on your security system. The types of locks you use maybe on your door and or your security system if you use one at home, right? Vacation pictures saying you're away from home, etc. Keep that in mind. For password managers, right, there's 3 really reputable companies that I recommend you sign up for. If you are not using one right now, make sure not just you, but all of your household uses a password manager. There's a free option that's usable. It's called LastPass. But I suggest, if you can afford that, to purchase one, because they come with often a lot of other features, such as identity theft protection. They'll let you know if you reuse passwords. They'll let you know for some, I know for Dashlane, will let me know if my passwords have been found in a breach, and alert me to change my password immediately. So these are just extra features that will make your online presence a little bit more secure. Now, I realize there's only 10 minutes left to this webinar. We, I would say, are not even close to being done looking at all of the defenses for every method and purpose of stalking online. So I will kind of give you a little bit of an overview of some of the slides so that you can just kind of get a sense of what you can look at offline after this webinar, and maybe some things you can go over after as well. So for defenses, we continue, we look at email, instant messaging, website browser history, spyware, stalkerware. We were looking at a lot of different things. I really want to emphasize how to detect in-person cameras. There's a great podcast. It's called the Privacy, Security, and OSINT Show. It's episode 119 with Michael Bazzell and his guest, Tom Gibbons, who is a retired FBI agent. And he goes over his strategies to finding hidden cameras and devices in people's homes, hotel rooms, businesses, etc. These devices, they can look like anything nowadays. I have bought, just because I'm testing, cameras that look like water bottles, fire, smoke detectors, right? I've seen some that look like car keys. But they're all, most of them, most modern spying cameras are really tiny computers, which means that they emit heat, right? And so if you can get this tool that I've pictured, the one I am using at my home on the right, it's called a Spot Infrared Thermal Imager. They're a bit expensive, but you can use them to really, really easily find unusual heat sources, right? If I take a look at my bookcase and I see some heat being emitted from my bookcase, that will look very suspicious to me. I will take a closer look, follow the heat map from my Spot Infrared Thermal Imager, and kind of inspect it, right? But you might also want to look at your local outlets, all of your electrical outlets. What devices are plugged into your outlets? Any of them something you don't recognize, right? You may want to scan your local Wi-Fi network or home network for unknown devices. So these are some things to keep in mind. Finally, as you go through these, if you find that, this isn't enough and you really need to step up your game because perhaps you have a very persistent stalker, you have a very persistent attacker, I would highly suggest buying this book. The newest edition just came out on May 27th. Again, this is by the author Michael Bazzell, the same one who has this great podcast that I recommended a second ago. And his book is about 500 plus pages of very rich, step-by-step, it's just a how-to guide for things such as how to ensure privacy and security in your home. So everything from your router to your online accounts to using other identities so that you can hide your own identity so that it's not picked up by perhaps people's search engines, things of the sort. Excellent resource. I cannot understate that. It's a great resource. Finally, as you go through these slides, there's also a protecting yourself section where I go over things such as using the password manager, how to set it up, things to look for, setting up multi-factor authentication, links to resources that might help you. But one more thing I want to highlight before we leave is there's a section here for gathering evidence, right? What to do if this is a situation that you are in. And one thing that has changed recently is that I used to recommend gathering evidence, using maybe some screenshotting tools and such, but there's this really great app nowadays. It's called DocuSafe. And it's developed by the National Network for Ending Domestic Violence. And it helps you gather evidence like text, emails, videos, screenshots, and it also even has, timelines so you can take notes about your case if you're trying to build a case against someone, and it's easy to use. It's available for both Android and iOS, so I really highly suggest you give it a try if that's something that works for you. Now, of course, this is an app for a phone, so you can still take screenshots, save site pages, videos, and emails for when you're on a laptop or computer. But very important to, of course, just keep grabbing screenshots of everything, keep saving everything, because you never know if down the line, right, if you ever so choose to take that and report that, you'll have that at least backed up somewhere. You'll have that evidence, and it's better, right, to have it than need it, and then, well, you deleted the text or you deleted this email because maybe it was upsetting. And that's fine, that's normal, but just some thoughts out there for maybe how you want to approach, you know, gathering this kind of information. I know I wish there were some times where I've deleted evidence that I wish I had not. So again, it's up to you. Finally, I go over a lot of local resources for Spokane area, but also US-based resources, revenge porn resources, and I invite everyone that has any questions or that would like some one-on-one technology, privacy, and security counseling to go to our calendly.com link listed here, calendly.com/FA-open office to schedule some time if you would like for us to go over your online presence or if there's anything we can help you privacy, security, or technology-wise. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. If you have any questions, again, you can post them in the Q&A right now. You're also welcome to either find us on Twitter or drop us an email at security@futureada.org. I'm going to stop the recording right now.